proceeds to the apostles to care for the needs of their community. And you ask why? Well, the previous chapter tells us, Acts chapter 4, the community of believers were united as one. One heart, one mind. No one said, that's mine, you can't have it. They shared everything, so there wasn't a person in need among them. That's the power of the Holy Spirit. Those who owned fields or houses sold them and brought the proceeds to the apostles as an offering, and the apostles distributed it according to each person's need. This was such a remarkable characteristic of the early Christians that it's actually already the second time in the book of Acts that the author, Luke, has told this story. Back in Acts chapter 2, following their experience of the Holy Spirit on Pentecost, all the believers were united as one heart, one mind. The believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to their community, to their shared meals, and to their prayers. They would sell pieces of property and possessions and distribute the proceeds to everyone who needed them. Sound familiar? Must be important. And then Barnabas is specifically lifted up as an example. Barnabas, whose name means encourager. Well, he owned a field, he sold it, and brought the money and placed it under the care and authority of the apostles. And you think, what an inspiration he is. And the next word is, however. So you got, yay, Barnabas, and then let me tell you, however, about Ananias and Sapphira, because they saw the example of Barnabas and all the others, and they too decided to sell a piece of property, but this husband and wife duo decided that they would hold back a piece of the proceeds for themselves. Now, to be clear, that was their right to do. Peter even said so. He told Ananias, that was your property to keep. And after you sold it, it was your money to do with as you wanted. But Peter could tell there was some kind of deception going on. What was it? Well, Peter said they lied to the Holy Spirit, which that's not really a very helpful explanation, is it? But Ananias understood, and when he heard it, dropped dead. Let's be clear, he wasn't struck dead. I mean, that might be in some parts of the Bible, but at least not here. He wasn't struck dead, he dropped dead from a conscience attack. It's wrapped up, carried out, and buried, and a very frightful and puzzling conclusion to which we say, thanks be to God. This is not an inspiring story. It could have been. I mean, this was the perfect opportunity to teach about two of the central ideas in Christianity. You know, honesty about our actions and forgiveness. For example, the story could have been that when Ananias was confronted by his deception, it broke his heart. He realized his error and he begged forgiveness. And he promised to change his ways. And he did. Look at what this man became. He became the greatest philanthropist in history. Instead, he realized what he had done was wrong and dropped dead. There's no opportunity for redemption in that. This is not an inspiring story. Oh, and by the way, it gets worse. Okay, in the end, so 3 hours later, Sapphira arrived. She didn't know anything had happened to her husband. And Peter said, tell me, was this the price you were given for your field? Yes, that's the price. Peter replied, well, how could you scheme with each other? But again, doesn't specify exactly what that scheme was, leaving us to wonder what was the real offense. But it was bad enough that when confronted with it, she too immediately dropped dead. Just fell to the ground, another conscience attack. They were under no obligation to sell. And in fact, the problem wasn't even that they held some back, which what they were free to do. So then what is this problem that resulted in such extreme action? So my theory is that they pretended to give the entire proceeds of the sale to receive recognition for their generosity. They pretended that it was because of the Holy Spirit that they were inspired to give, just like Barnabas and all the others. But the Holy Spirit would never inspire us to do less than we are already capable of doing. The Spirit's in the business of inspiring us to do more than we thought possible. This is a betrayal of the Holy Spirit, to do less. Ananias and Sapphira wanted praise for their acts of generosity, which they were, just not quite as generous as they wanted people to think. So their motivation was status in the community, not love for the community. In the origin story of the church, they were the first pretend Christians. That can actually mean a lot of things. You know, we're well aware of declining rates of church participation across the country. And it's not all a bad thing. It just means people don't have to pretend anymore. Right? I mean, for a long time, some people's motivation to belong to a church had more to do with cultural expectation than religious orientation, maybe some family pressure. Everyone was supposed to belong to a church, and now they're free not to. It's not that they had bad intentions, but now, since they won't be judged for not going to church, they're not going to church. And please understand, I'm not trying to cast any blame here, but some people felt it was necessary to pretend to be a Christian, to fit in, to be accepted. And isn't honesty and freedom better for everyone involved? Of course, I would suggest in return that belonging to a church is a good thing. That participating in religious rituals that take us out of ourselves, that connect us to ancient traditions, that practicing generosity and giving kids a moral grounding and caring for our neighbors and being cared for by our neighbors, these are all amazing things that bring tremendous meaning to our lives. You know, talk about pretending. We often like to pretend that we are at the center of the universe. But it's a really good thing to be reminded on a regular basis, we are not. Life will be better if we realize we are not at the center of it. But why did Luke tell this story? Secondarily, why did I choose to tell this story? Of all the important things that Luke could have chosen to say about the origins of the church at the very beginning, why include this less than inspiring story about Ananias and Sapphira? And I'm sure there's plenty of reasons that Luke chose it, but the one that speaks to me today was his concern for the appearance of hypocrisy among early Christians. This couple wanted to look generous. They sought out status, but they weren't acting out of love. And that's simply not Christianity. Luke wanted us to be clear about that from the very beginning. These folks were not misers. They weren't cheapskates. They were simply imposters, pretenders. And Luke cautions the early church to be careful. Be very careful, because hypocrisy can be deadly. You know, the kind of pretend Christianity that is killing the church in America. And don't blame people leaving the church. Many are reacting quite understandably and logically to an inexplicable form of Christianity that seeks privilege for itself, that professes love for authoritarians, that embraces the denial of science and a distrust of women and the demonization of immigrants. It is all in such stark contrast with the descriptions of the early church, characterized by its remarkable generosity and sacrificial concern for all who have need. It is a betrayal of the Holy Spirit. Which is why I have such gratitude for churches like this. Not perfect, by any means. But oh my goodness, at least trying, aspiring to love and understand and serve, to do more than it would seem possible were it not for the Holy Spirit. From the bottom of my heart, please hear my gratitude for genuine generosity and compassionate spirit. I give thanks for your orientation to the community. What do people around us need? And it is churches like this that many of us depend upon to remain in Christian community, or we might also be among the formerly churched. I see some heads shaking about that. Yeah, I might not be a Christian if some of what Christianity is defined to be really was what Christianity is. I'd be like, yeah, where's Starbucks in the morning? So, not to be self-congratulatory, but I do think it needs to be stated again. Churches like this that try matter, and we shouldn't keep it a secret. And I know I kind of threw some arrows at so-called pretenders. So then let's turn the gaze inward, right? Let's be reflective. Are we as loving and accepting as we profess to be? Are we pretending to care? As individuals, are you? Are we using our resources to address human need in our communities? Not for recognition, but for the requirement of love insisted upon by the Holy Spirit. Am I trying to hold back what the Spirit is inviting me to let go of and share? And I ask this because I don't want to just pretend to be a Christian. Do you?